Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. 2 days after the Pahalgam terrorist attack, India's Prime Minister has vowed retaliation. Prime Minister Modi has warned Pakistan of punishment beyond imagination. It was a message to all, to Indians, to Pakistan's leaders, and to the rest of the world. India is preparing a response on many fronts. We will bring you up to speed. Among the diplomatic moves is the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty that has withstood all previous attacks and wars. Now India has suspended it. We'll tell you why this is a big blow to Pakistan. In Islamabad, the farce continues. First denial, then rage, and the suspension of the Shimla Agreement, which they never honored in the first place. Will the world continue to indulge them? The Taliban of all has condemned this attack. Why has the Pakistan Army Chief gone silent after stoking terror? Islamabad threatens to use force. The first casualty of a clash would be their economy, which is already on life support. A special report on how Kashmir is faring 2 days after the attack. In other news, Donald Trump has made a dramatic retraction from 245% tariffs to exploring a special deal with China. In the Gaza war, a plot twist. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas calls Hamas sons of dogs. And Donald Trump clashes with Zalinski yet again, saying it's easier to deal with Putin. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Swedish fighter jets intercept a Russian plane near Poland. The jets under NATO command were scrambled to escort the Russian reconnaissance plane. The incident took place over the Baltic Sea, where tensions have escalated since the Ukraine war began in 2022. Sweden joined NATO in March 2024. Syrian president says Damascus is willing to join the Abraham Accords under the right conditions. He made these remarks while meeting a US official. The two leaders discussed normalizing ties between Syria and Israel and the lifting of American and European sanctions on Damascus. The Abraham Accords were brokered during Trump's first term. Germany's economy is expected to post zero growth in 2025. Berlin blames Donald Trump's trade policy for this. The US is Germany's largest trading partner. Berlin has also been hit by Chinese competition in key industries like automobiles. Europe's top economy has been shrinking for the last 2 years. The Democratic Republic of Congo's government and the M23 rebels pledged to a truce. Both sides agree to hold fighting in the east of the country and work towards a permanent truce. The surprise announcement comes after talks mediated by Qatar. Since 2021, more than 6 ceasefires have been agreed to, but none have held. And in Sri Lanka, police appealed to devotees to avoid visiting a sacred Buddha tooth relic. It comes after a woman died and hundreds of people queuing fell sick. Officials estimate that there are nearly 500,000 people in the queue in the city of Kandy. The relic was last displayed publicly in 2009.
उनकी कल्पना से भी बड़ी सजा मिलेगी. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi always speaks in Hindi. At the United Nations, he delivers speeches in Hindi. At the White House, he spoke in Hindi. And at home, it's the same deal. He never veers from Hindi. But today, he did. The Indian Prime Minister was speaking at an event in the state of Bihar. It was his first speech after the Kashmir attack. During this address, the Prime Minister switched to English for a short but powerful message. Listen to this.
Today, from the soil of Bihar, I say to the whole world, India will identify, track and punish every terrorist and their backers. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth. India's spirit will never be broken by terrorism. Terrorism will not go unpunished.
Why this rare change? Because this was not just a message to Indians or even to Pakistanis. This was a message to the whole world. If the culprits are in Pakistan, they will be hit. It's only a question of how and when. Right now, India is preparing on two fronts. The first is military moves. We are seeing anti-terror operations in Jammu and Kashmir. In Udhampur, security forces targeted terror hideouts. One soldier was killed in the gunfight. In Poonch, another operation is underway. The army is looking to flush out terrorists hiding there. These are dense, hilly areas. So the operations will be long and draining. Outside Kashmir, bigger preparations are underway. Today, the Indian Navy conducted a test. It fired a missile from the INS Surat. Now, the INS Surat is an indigenous missile destroyer. It shot down a fast, low-moving target. Take a look at this. There is some background here. Pakistan issued a maritime notice yesterday. They're doing live fire drills in the Arabian Sea for 2 days, today and tomorrow. Their plan is to test a surface-to-surface missile. And that is why India carried out its own test. What India fired is called an interceptor missile. Its job is to shoot down incoming projectiles. So India is covering all its bases. As for the retaliation, there is no consensus yet. Some experts are expecting India to hit back in days. Others say it could take weeks. And naturally, the government is silent. They will keep all plans under wraps. But India's former army chief has proposed a strategy. I'm talking about retired General M.M. Naravne. Let me quote from what he said. In the aftermath of the attack, Pakistan will be on guard, knowing that it is now in the crosshairs. Let them be on tenterhooks for a while till they start jumping at shadows. Meanwhile, we must build up global support through political, diplomatic and military channels of communication for our retaliatory measures for when, not if, happens. Let me simplify that for you. The general wants Pakistan to stew. In the meantime, he's asking India to build up diplomatic support. Then, when Pakistan least expects it, hit back. Which brings us to India's second front, building political support. This involves moves at home and abroad. Today, the Defence Minister chaired an all-party meeting. He briefed the opposition on the Kashmir attack. The idea is to ensure that everyone is on the same page. During such times, political parties do unite behind the government, but it's also important to keep them in the loop. And same thing abroad. You just heard Prime Minister Modi's speech in Bihar. That was India's declaration of intent. Next comes consensus building. Today, the Foreign Secretary of India invited envoys of G20 nations for a briefing. Representatives of all major powers were briefed. Germany, the UK, Japan, Russia, France, the European Union, even China. They were all briefed. Chances are this is the first step. We may also see the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister get busy on the phone. They may want to keep India's partners in the loop. In fact, Prime Minister Modi had 2 phone conversations today with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, the final decision must be New Delhi's. Other countries will try to discourage India, and that has been the pattern in the past too. The world knows that both India and Pakistan are nuclear powers, so leaders across the world are scared of a nuclear escalation. But New Delhi should stand firm. Just like it did in 2016 and 2019, there must be a firm response against Pakistan. The public expectation is something deadlier than a surgical strike or an airstrike. Let's see which way India goes.
India will identify, track and punish
India has fired its first diplomatic salvo in response to the Pahalgam terror attack. The first wave of diplomatic measures was launched yesterday. Visas for Pakistani nationals have been cancelled. A key border checkpost has been closed. Pakistani military advisors have been expelled, and Indian diplomatic staff in Islamabad is being reduced. But among all the moves, there is one that stands out. India has suspended the Indus Water Treaty, a treaty that withstood 6 decades of hostility, 4 wars, and years of cross-border terrorism. In all these years, the Indus Water Treaty was never touched. But that changed yesterday.
The Indus Water Treaty of 1960 will be held in abeyance with immediate effect until Pakistan credibly and irrevocably abjures its support for cross-border terrorism.
It will be held in abeyance, is what he said. That basically means a pause or a suspension. The Indus Water Treaty was signed in 1960. It was brokered by the World Bank. The idea behind it was quite simple. 6 rivers are part of the Indus River system. After the partition of India and Pakistan, most river origin points fell within India. A system was needed to share these waters. The Indus Water Treaty gave that system. It established a framework for water sharing between India and Pakistan. And here is how it works. 6 rivers were evenly divided. The eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas and Satluj, were allocated to India. India has exclusive access to their waters. Similarly, the western rivers were all allocated to Pakistan. That's Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. India retains limited rights over the western rivers. It can use some water sometimes, but the conditions are quite strict. India can access these waters from the western rivers for stuff like irrigation, transport and hydropower. More importantly, it cannot divert the flow. And Pakistan needs access to these rivers. They irrigate, the Pakistanis, they irrigate nearly 80% of their cultivated land using these waters. That's around 16 million hectares. These rivers are a lifeline for Pakistan, and India's decision to suspend the treaty would hurt Pakistan's access. New Delhi cannot terminate this treaty. There is no exit clause. So neither country, neither India nor Pakistan, can abrogate the treaty unilaterally, but India can still exercise some options. Number 1, it can halt the flow of these waters. India can stop releasing controlled water from dams, like the Baglihar Dam on the Chenab River. This will not stop the natural flow of the river, but it's going to reduce the controlled supply. What does that mean? What is controlled supply? Basically, India can stop releasing the extra water stored in dams. Currently, India manages this flow. It is crucial for Pakistan's farms and cities. They need this water for irrigation, also to meet their drinking water needs. Without India's supply, the rivers will still flow, but Pakistan will receive less water. So that's one option, to restrict the flow of water. The second option is strategic acceleration. India could fast-track infrastructure on the western rivers. It can build storage dams. It can set up more hydroelectric projects. India shares data with Pakistan on the flow of water. This can be stopped immediately. India could also deny access to project sites. Pakistani officials regularly visit dams under construction. Those visits may now be blocked. So India has a lot of flexibility. By suspending this treaty, India gets multiple options. Some are measured, others are extreme. For decades, the Indus Treaty was sacrosanct. Even after terrorist attacks, even during wars, water was never used as a weapon. But that era may now be coming to an end. The attack in Pahalgam has changed the rules. New Delhi has signaled that old constraints will no longer apply. And what is Pakistan's response? Well, they've issued a sharp statement. It said, and I quote, "Any attempt to stop or divert the flow of water belonging to Pakistan as per the Indus Water Treaty and the usurpation of the rights of lower riparian will be considered as an act of war." An act of war is what they're calling it. New Delhi has not responded to this statement, but the suspension of the treaty is just one part of India's retaliation. Diplomatic steps will be followed by military action. Pakistan has been warned. Have you heard of schizophrenia? It's a serious mental illness. It distorts how a person thinks, feels, and perceives reality. You see things that aren't there. You believe things that never happened. Basically, you behave like Pakistan. Its leaders sound like serious cases of schizophrenia. Because right now, they seem to be living in delusion. What do we hear from Islamabad? Rage. They have once again slipped into their favorite role, the role of the aggrieved neighbor. Yesterday, India announced the first retaliatory measures against Pakistan, and today, Islamabad is responding. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif convened the National Security Council. They met for a few hours, and they have come up with a list of moves. This is what they've decided. Closing the Wagah border, suspending all visas under SARC, expelling Indian diplomats, declaring Indian military advisors persona non grata, reducing High Commission staff in India, closing the airspace to India, and halting all trade. If it sounds very similar, it is because it is. This reads like a tit-for-tat checklist. It is meticulously drafted to match India's tone and to overwhelm it. But there's one point that stands out, and I will quote from the Pakistani statement. Pakistan shall exercise the right to hold all bilateral agreements with India, including but not limited to Shimla Agreement, in abeyance. Basically, what it means is this: Pakistan has suspended all bilateral deals with India, including the Shimla Agreement. It is perhaps the most controversial move of all. The Shimla Agreement was signed in 1972. This was after the 1971 war, which Pakistan lost. Its core principle was simple. India and Pakistan would resolve their disputes peacefully and bilaterally, without the involvement of third parties. This is what the agreement said. It led to the definition of the LOC, the line of control, the de facto border between the two countries. So what does the suspension mean? In real terms, it doesn't mean very much. The agreement was already fraying. Pakistan has rarely honored it, neither in spirit nor in practice. But symbolically, it is a rupture, a signal that Pakistan is no longer interested in even pretending to seek peace. So yes, the decision carries symbolism, but it also reeks of hypocrisy. Look at a statement from a Pakistani senator. He called the Pahalgam attack a false flag operation. He said it was orchestrated by the Indian army. So according to him, India killed its own people. That's the story they're selling. I'm not sure what's worse, the delusion or the sheer audacity. Here's another gem. Pakistan's defense minister says he has some classified information. It is this man, Khwaja Mohammad Asif. He says India is planning acts of terrorism in various cities around the country. I will say that again. India is planning acts of terrorism in Pakistani cities. This is a country that has harbored and sponsored terrorists for decades. Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism. It is now accusing the world's largest democracy of plotting terror attacks. The irony writes itself. The global press is describing Pakistan's actions as reciprocal. India expelled attaches, so did Pakistan. India is reviewing water rights. Pakistan calls it an act of war. But reciprocity implies equal stakes. That both sides are reacting from the same ethical platform. The fact is they are not. India is responding to a deadly terror attack on its people, on its soil. Pakistan is responding to being called out, to being exposed. That difference is significant and it matters. So the question now is not whether India will respond again. The real question is whether the world will continue indulging Pakistan's schizophrenia. A state that speaks the language of peace while renting out its backyard to those who wage war. No wonder the world is weary of its narrative. And to be honest, the script has become too predictable. Terror strikes, condemnations are tweeted, India blames, Pakistan denies, Islamabad retaliates not against the perpetrators, but against India. And then there's a lull until the next attack. Maybe it's time we stopped calling this a cycle, because that word implies inevitability. What's happening here is not inevitable. It is engineered by Pakistan. It is time to hold them accountable.
We are different from the Hindus in every possible aspect of life.
The attack may have happened in Kashmir, but make no mistake, it was plotted in Rawalpindi. That is where Pakistan's real leader holds court. I'm talking about their army chief, General Asim Munir. He was visiting Central Asia yesterday. He met the president of Kazakhstan in Astana. But today he was back in Islamabad. Just look at him in Pakistan's national security meeting, a pen and notepad in hand. He's writing down what Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is saying. It has to be the biggest farce in the world. Everyone knows who calls the shots in Pakistan. It's certainly not the Prime Minister, it is the army chief. And his intention was quite clear last week. General Munir fired a warning shot at India. He called Kashmir his country's jugular vein.
Government stance on Kashmir is absolutely clear. It was our jugular vein. It is our jugular vein. We will not forget it. And we will not leave our Kashmiri brethren in their heroic struggle, what they are waging against the Indian occupation.
Days later, the Pahalgam attack happened. But since then, he's been silent. No bravado, no tall claims, and no hate speeches. General Munir has let the government do the talking. Frankly, it's classic Rawalpindi tactic. They plot terror attacks across the border, and when things get serious, they curiously go silent. The question is, what does Asim Munir want? Does he want a full-fledged confrontation? Does he want a flare-up? Does he want a distraction? Or does he want a resolution? The first scenario appears unlikely. Pakistan's military is already stretched. They're facing challenges along the borders with Iran and Afghanistan. Plus, there is a militant threat in Balochistan. So I'm sure General Munir has read some history as well. He was too young in 1971 to remember what happened. Pakistan surrendered to the Indian military. That's what happened in 1971. So General Munir cannot risk a full-fledged conflict with India. If common sense prevails, that is. What about a flare-up or distraction? Well, a flare-up would be a distraction, and General Munir could use that right now. The Pakistan army does not have the grip on power it once did. Recent political events have turned many Pakistanis against them. We saw that in 2023 when Imran Khan was arrested. Thousands of his supporters hit the streets in protest. They also targeted military offices. Those protests really shook the Pakistan army. Because until then, the army was beyond doubt or protest. A sort of sacred institution in Pakistan. They lived with that illusion. It was broken 2 years back. And since then, it's been a downward spiral. The economy is mostly in the dumps. Investors and allies have largely run away. And the provinces are in rebellion. You saw the train hijacking in Balochistan last month. It was a brazen and risky attack. And it was not a one-off. Pakistan logged, listen to this, they saw more than 1,100 terror attacks last year. It was the highest in more than 10 years, 1,100 attacks in 1 year. Of course, these were done by bad terrorists, not the good kind who slaughtered innocents in Kashmir, because that's how Pakistan sees terrorism. The good ones attack India, the bad ones attack Pakistan, but that's a story for another day perhaps. The point right now is Pakistan's security situation is pretty bad. The army has been unable to keep people safe. Actually, forget people. Soldiers and police officers are among the biggest victims of these attacks. So the Pakistan army cannot even keep itself safe. And finally, you have the Imran Khan factor. His supporters have not given up the fight. His party remains immensely popular across Pakistan, which is why Asim Munir would love a distraction. a face-off, but not a war. A response from India would give him that. A cause to rally all Pakistanis, a chance to boost the army's morale and popularity. But will it work? For a few months, maybe. In the long term, no. Pakistan and India have chosen very different paths. In India, we are having all-party discussions. In Pakistan, their top opposition leader is in jail. In India, Kashmiri Muslims stood up against the terrorism. In Pakistan, the army chief praised the two-nation theory. In India, the army awaits the Prime Minister's order. In Pakistan, the Prime Minister awaits the army's order. Only one of these systems is designed to win, and that is India's. General Asim Munir can sponsor terror to hide his failures, but he won't succeed for long. His speech last week reeked of desperation. His silence now exposes it. Of all things absurd, this next story truly takes the cake. The entire world has condemned the terror attack in Kashmir. But there is one statement that stands out, a statement from the Taliban. They too have condemned it. More importantly, they say it destabilizes regional peace. This is a group known for suicide bombings, stonings, and executions. They now say they are disturbed by violence. Is this a shift? Or just a new strategy in an old game? Because while the Taliban talks peace, US weapons are still making their way from Afghanistan to Kashmir. In fact, American-made M4 carbines were used in the latest attack. So can the Taliban really sell peace while still selling guns? Our next report tells you.
It doesn't get more tragic than this. And while India reeled and the country seethed and scrambled for answers, here's a statement that made people do a double take. The Taliban has condemned the attack. You heard that right. The Taliban has condemned this terror attack. And here's a line that stands out. Such incidents undermine efforts to ensure regional security and stability. Yes, that Taliban, the same group that blew up schools in Kandahar, that banned music, that turned soccer stadiums into execution arenas, that gave Osama bin Laden a safe sanctuary. That Taliban wants us to know that it is condemning the attack. And it isn't just condemning the attack, the Taliban is disturbed by violence and concerned about regional peace. But is the world supposed to take this at face value? You see, the Taliban came to power in 2021. It was a sudden power grab. The US military was forced to retreat. This was a very hasty withdrawal. The US military left behind weapons, and a lot of them at that. For the last 4 years, these weapons have been flowing from Afghanistan to the global market. Basically, the Taliban is selling them. And who are the buyers? Well, anyone who's willing to pay the price. Insurgent groups, terrorists and militias. Many weapons even made their way to India's Jammu and Kashmir. So from the United States to Afghanistan and then to Kashmir via Pakistan. These weapons are being used by terror groups, the likes of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. The valley is flooded with US M4 and M16 assault rifles. In 2023, the Indian Army said that they're seeing these weapons for the first time in Kashmir. And now look at the latest attack. The terrorists used AK-47 rifles and American-made M4 carbines. But this isn't the first time the M4 was used. In 2024, terrorists used the M4 for an attack on a tourist bus in Riyasi. That same year, the M4 carbine was used in the Kathua attack where soldiers were targeted. There's also Afghanistan's strained relationship with Pakistan. There have been frequent border skirmishes. Pakistan expelled Afghan refugees. There were border closures, and all of this has disrupted business and trade. The two sides have tried a diplomatic reboot, but this attack in Kashmir gives Kabul the perfect opportunity to take a stand. So what do we have here? This is a group that's been at the center of global terror for decades. It's now pretending to be a statesman. The Taliban, who built their power on violence, now claims to be a voice for stability. And yet, the very weapons they profit off, the very networks they enable, the very terrorist groups they've hosted, trained and armed over the years are still active. They are still targeting innocent people in places like Jammu and Kashmir. So if you're wondering why the Taliban would even bother issuing a statement, here's your answer. Because in 2025, optics is everything. Even terror groups want good PR. They want to look moderate, diplomatic, and even reasonable. But make no mistake, this isn't peace talk. This is a mask. The Taliban can write statements, but the world should be reading the fine print.
So even the Taliban has condemned the attack in Kashmir, and that alone shows how isolated Pakistan is today. Since the attack, support for India has been pouring in. A wide range of world leaders have shown solidarity, and this would give New Delhi a lot of confidence to do what needs to be done. But despite everything, Pakistan remains defiant. It is issuing warnings saying that Indian operations will be met with force. The question is, can Pakistan afford that fight? It is on the edge of financial quicksand. For all its posturing, Pakistan is a pauper state. And in a clash with India, Pakistan's economy will be the first casualty. The signs are already visible. Today, Pakistan's stock market nosedived. The KSE 100 index lost over 2,000 points. Investors were already nervous. India's diplomatic and economic measures added to the panic. And this may just be the beginning. Border trade has been suspended. This directly hits Pakistan's industrial supply chains. In 2024, India's exports to Pakistan reached a 5-year high. This was despite the strained ties. India shipped goods worth over $1 billion, from pharmaceuticals to chemicals to confectionery and sugar. India also imported apparel, salt, and cement from Pakistan. Now that flow has stopped, and the impact will be immediate. After the 2019 Pulwama attack, India substantially cut trade with Pakistan. It withdrew Pakistan's most favored nation status. It raised import duties to 200%. This had a direct impact on Pakistan's exports. They almost collapsed. Look at the numbers. In 2019, exports from Pakistan were close to $550 million. By 2024, they fell to $480,000. So from 550 million to just 480,000. And that gap will only widen now. It will worsen Pakistan's trade deficit. Their cash reserves are already under pressure. We're talking about foreign exchange here. It's the money that a country needs to finance its imports. How much does Islamabad have in the bank? How much money? As of March 21st, when the last release came, Pakistan had a little over $10 billion, which is barely enough to cover 2 months of imports. And even that number is slipping. $540 million was lost in a single week last month. Pakistan had to pay off some loans, and the $540 million went towards that, towards the payment or repayment of a loan. International agencies are sounding the alarm. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has cut Pakistan's growth forecast. It has been slashed from 3 to 2.6%. The World Bank and Fitch have issued similar warnings. Agriculture is stagnant. Industry is shrinking. The Pakistani rupee is expected to weaken further, and jobs remain scarce. Behind this economic slide lies a fundamental truth. This country is under an IMF bailout program. This is Pakistan's bailout number 24. That's the highest number of bailouts for any country ever, 24, in less than 8 decades. So today, every policy decision is tied to austerity. A military conflict would rip through this fragile balance. It would trigger a fresh wave of inflation. It would derail Pakistan's currency. Islamabad would have to divert funds from development projects to defense. Of course, the military won't mind that. Pakistan's generals are used to blank checks. It's the people who pay the price. And the army is willing to impose that cost on them once again to retain its relevance in the power matrix. Back in Kashmir, today shops have opened in many parts. Children were seen going to school, but there were few tourists on the roads. Airlines are operating special flights from Srinagar. More than 11,000 tourists left Kashmir just yesterday, and more continue to follow. Meanwhile, security remains tight across the valley with additional checkpoints and special forces patrolling tourist hotspots. It has been about 2 days since the terrorist attack shook Kashmir. Our next report tells you how it has impacted the valley, its economy, and its people.
Flights going to Srinagar, empty. The popular Dal Lake, deserted. The picturesque tourist hub of Pahalgam, a ghost town. This is the aftermath of a tragedy that has torn families apart. On Tuesday, terrorists opened fire on tourists in Pahalgam. About 2 days later, Kashmir remains on high alert. Security has been beefed up across the valley, especially at vital tourist spots and hotels. There is a large deployment of police, including the CRPF or the Central Reserve Police Force and quick reaction teams, which are deployed near tourist hotspots. Special forces and sniffer dogs can be seen patrolling popular tourist areas. Additional checkpoints have been set up on highways and in sensitive areas. Tours to Pahalgam, Doodh Pathri and Yusmarg have been restricted by the authorities. So the necessary security measures are in place. Yet, understandably, an environment of fear persists for the tourists. Yesterday, people were seen leaving in droves, in cabs, on buses and flights. After the initial price hike and a warning from the government, airline prices dropped. Air India and Indigo, which are operating in the region, have increased the number of flights. They have started operating special flights. 59 flights left from Srinagar yesterday, and about 11,000 people, mostly holidayers, flew out of Srinagar. And it has continued today. Hundreds of tourists returned home as governments from their resident states help in their evacuation efforts. But some are unable to leave, given the poor internet access in many areas, limited information, rush for flight tickets, and road restrictions.
हमारा 7 दिन का प्रोग्राम था, वो हमने कैंसिल करके इस समय हम भद्रवा में हैं और यहाँ से वापसी जाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, लेकिन चारों तरफ से रास्ते बंद हैं.
Many tourists are now staying indoors, cooped up inside hotels, desperately waiting for their vacation-turned-nightmare to get over. They are eager to return home, and this is bound to hurt Kashmir further. After shutting down markets, businesses and schools on Wednesday in protest over the attack, life has resumed in many parts of Kashmir. Students in Srinagar were seen walking to their schools this morning. But what you will hardly see on the roads are tourists, and local businesses are feeling the pinch. Tourism contributes to more than 8% of Kashmir's GDP. About 60% of the population is directly or indirectly linked to it. Over the last 3 years, tourism has risen by 15%. But after the horror on Tuesday, many tour companies say that they have seen a 90% cancellation. As shops shut their doors and transportation becomes tough, prices for some essentials have increased overnight. Locals say that transport fares have doubled in some parts. The cowardly attack on civilians has left the country engulfed in grief. While Kashmir maintains its resolve to fight terror, it's also bracing to battle the ripple effects of the horror that shattered dozens of lives.
Our next story is from the United States of America. The White House is making a stunning U-turn. President Donald Trump is having a change of heart. Last week, he roared about crushing China with tariffs. Now he's singing a softer tune and slashing tariffs drastically, from 245% to 50 to 65%. That's what reports say. 50 to 65, a massive drop from 245% and a dramatic retreat. What explains this? Is it economic reality or a calculated move in a high-stakes trade war? The answer is, It's a bit of both. 2 weeks ago, Trump declared war from the White House. He announced sweeping tariffs on China, 145% on all Chinese imports, 245% on some Chinese goods, and the result was a massacre. Global markets crashed, almost all indices were in the red, trillions of dollars were wiped out, and what did China do? Well, they hit back with 125% tariffs. Basically, China did not blink. They called Trump's bluff, forcing the US president to take a softer stance. He says he wants to lower the tariffs, but first he wants a deal.
Over the next 2-3 weeks, we'll be setting the number, and we're going to pick, could be for China too, could be for China. We're dealing with almost all of them. Too many to fully deal with, but we're going to be fair to them. But we're dealing with a lot of countries right now, and could be with China, but maybe we'll make a special, a deal.
So from 245% tariffs to a special deal, what is it that forced Trump's hand? The US economy, inflation has spiked, supply chains are choked, recession is around the corner, and Americans are paying the price for their president's bluster. From food to cars to clothing, everything is costlier. Trump calls it short-term pain, but ordinary Americans are reeling. Even Trump's closest ally, Elon Musk, has opposed the tariffs. The trade war has divided the president's team. There have been heated arguments in the West Wing of the White House between Elon Musk and Trump's loyalists. Reports say there was a shouting match. But now the winds are changing. Even pro-tariff advisors are calling for de-escalation, like Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the US, the man responsible for America's economic policies. Like his president, Scott Bessent now wants a trade deal with China.
There is an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy.
The rollback is not surprising. Donald Trump may be a businessman and a self-proclaimed deal maker, but he's also a politician. He campaigned on America first. That was his promise. But the tariffs have backfired spectacularly. Economic pain has led to political backlash. The US president is under serious pressure at home. At least 12 states have sued his administration. They're challenging Trump's authority to impose sweeping tariffs. The US stock market is jittery. Investors are cheering the possibility of de-escalation, and Trump sees all of this. So he is recalibrating, not completely abandoning the tariffs, but softening the edges. This gives more room for talks. And that is already happening in a lot of cases. Countries are lining up to strike a deal with the US, which is what Trump wanted. He wanted business on America's terms. So what does this de-escalation mean for the world? First, the global economy could get a breather. Second, nations that Trump likes could benefit. For example, India. The US says the first trade deal will likely be with India. Vice President J.D. Vance just concluded his visit to India. He was in the country for 4 days. Vance met Prime Minister Modi. They ironed out plans for a trade deal, and now Washington says a deal with New Delhi is a priority. So India has navigated the storm well. What about the others? Europe is caught in the middle. They're hoping for a deal, but Trump is not really playing ball. And then there's China. They're in no mood to compromise. But they've also welcomed reports on the US lowering tariffs. China says it is open to trade talks. At the same time, it is being cautious because Trump remains unpredictable. One tweet, one interview, and the trade war could be back. The US president's backtracking is less about a victory for China and more of a reality check for Washington. Supply chains and economies are connected more than ever. You cannot just slap tariffs and expect factories to relocate overnight. These things take time. The trade war may have looked good on paper, but the battlefield turned out to be quite messy. Now let's turn our attention to the war in Gaza. It has witnessed a plot twist. Mahmoud Abbas has spoken up. Abbas is the president of the Palestinian Authority. Since Hamas took control of Gaza in 2007, Abbas has governed parts of the West Bank. Most Palestinians have criticized him for not taking action and for not speaking up enough. But now he has. He has lashed out against Hamas in his most furious speech since the war broke out. Mahmoud Abbas has called Hamas, and I'm quoting, sons of dogs, who must hand over control to Gaza, and stop giving Israel excuses to continue the war. Here's a report.
Hamas, the sons of dogs. We aren't saying this, Mahmoud Abbas has. He's the president of the Palestinian Authority. He spoke at a meeting of the Palestinian Central Council in Ramallah. He lashed out at Hamas and delivered a slightly out-of-character, fiery speech.
Every day, there are hundreds of deaths. Why? You sons of dogs, hand over what you have and get us out of this. Don't give Israel an excuse to continue. Don't give them an excuse.
Harsh words against Hamas. In fact, the harshest since the war in Gaza broke out 18 months ago. Here's some context. The Palestinian Authority, led by Abbas, has governed parts of the West Bank since Hamas took control of Gaza in 2007. For decades now, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have been at odds, and no unified leadership has overseen both Gaza and the West Bank. Hamas has accused the Palestinian Authority of collaborating with Israel, while the PA has regularly insisted that it can take over governing post-war Gaza, but for most Palestinians, Abbas is irrelevant. He has been criticized for not speaking up enough, for not taking enough action. He is effectively seen as ineffective. But now, he seems to be speaking up.
Hamas must end its control over the Gaza Strip, hand over the Strip entirely with all its affairs, and also surrender its weapons to the Palestinian National Authority. No self-respecting state has two sources of arms.
He has said that Hamas has given Israel excuses to attack Gaza. He demanded that the group release the hostages it is still holding. He wants Hamas to disarm. He wants the group to give its weapons to the Palestinian Authority and hand over control of Gaza to end the war with Israel.
Yet Hamas has given the criminal occupation excuses to commit its crimes in the Gaza Strip, the most prominent being the holding of hostages. Why have they taken them hostage? Just hand them over.
Hamas has condemned Abbas's comments, calling them derogatory language towards a significant proportion of his own people. Hamas has called this behavior suspicious, and Abbas's critics may agree. Last month, Israel resumed its offensive in Gaza. Since then, at least 1,928 Palestinians have been killed. Last week, Hamas rejected an Israeli proposal for a new ceasefire in Gaza. It included a demand to disarm in return for a 6-week pause in hostilities and the return of some remaining hostages. Hamas scrapped it, saying that it would hand over hostages when the war ends and Israel withdraws, and it ruled out giving up its weapons entirely. On Tuesday, 10 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike. According to Hamas, it hit a school that was being used as a shelter. According to Israel, it was a hideout for Hamas. On Wednesday, leaders from the United Kingdom, France and Germany called on Israel to end the aid blockade which it imposed in early March. But as tensions soar and amid a renewed push to advance ceasefire negotiations, Abbas is suddenly jumping in the mix. His furious remarks may have made global headlines, but they will have no impact to change the ground reality. They are too little too late at best and noise pollution at worst.
Our next story is about two leaders, Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. One is a reality TV star turned US president. The other is a comedian turned wartime leader. Put the two together and what do you get? Drama. You may remember Trump scolding Zelensky at the White House. This was in February. They're now trading barbs again, this time over Crimea. Trump wants Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. He believes this will end the war sooner. Zelensky says Crimea is a part of Ukraine and Kiev will not negotiate. Now Trump has hit back. The US president says Russia is easier to deal with and Zelensky has no cards to play. This clash is bigger than two men. Our next report has more.
Where do you go when you're craving some drama? Is it Netflix, YouTube, or your office cooler? But how about the White House? Has the U.S. president's residence ever crossed your mind? Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office has been nothing but a roller coaster ride. And one leader who wasn't ready for it was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. You may remember what happened on February 28th. Zelensky visited the White House. What was meant to be a meeting to boost U.S.-Ukraine ties turned into a shouting match. Trump accused Zelensky of deliberately refusing a peace deal, wishing for the war to continue. Zelensky tried to put his point across, but he was cut short by the U.S. president and his vice president.
You don't have the cards right now.
A month later, ties began normalizing. The Trump administration increased talks with their Ukrainian counterparts. Both sides are making progress, until last night when Trump lashed out at Zelensky again. The U.S. president took to Truth Social. He wrote, and I paraphrase, Zelensky should accept that Crimea is Russian territory. This will end the war faster because Zelensky is the man who has no cards to play. Trump also said that it was easier to deal with Russia than it was to deal with Zelensky. So Trump is openly chiding Zelensky. He says Zelensky could have made a deal and stopped the war. This includes accepting that Crimea is part of Russia. But this time Zelensky has hit back, firmly and publicly.
Ukraine does not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about. This is beyond our constitution. It's our territory, the territory of the people of Ukraine.
The Trump administration was quick to retaliate.
The president's frustrated. His patience is running very thin. He wants to do what's right for the world. He wants to see peace. He wants to see the killing stopped. But you need both sides of the war willing to do that. And unfortunately, President Zelensky seems to be moving in the wrong direction.
The clash between Trump and Zelensky may seem personal, but its impact is global. This is not about Crimea. It is about power, pride, and priorities. Trump wants a quick win, something he had promised Americans. This requires Russia and Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire. But Zelensky is fighting for survival. He wants to go down as the hero of Ukraine, who did everything for his country. But do you know who benefits? Russia. President Vladimir Putin is seeing these spats and smiling. He is looking to cash in on the divisions by launching more attacks. Only this time, Trump has called out the Russian president. Trump wrote on his Truth Social, "I'm not happy with Russia. Vladimir, stop." So after claiming it was easier to deal with Putin rather than Zelensky, Trump has issued a rare criticism of the Russian president. So it's not just the war in Ukraine that's dragging on. Looks like the drama between Trump, Zelensky, Putin is also far from over.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The U.S. Foreign Affairs Committee corrects a New York Times headline on the Kashmir terror attack. Thousands pay tribute to Pope Francis after his coffin is placed at St. Peter's Basilica. Turkish opposition supporters march to Ataturk's mausoleum despite a ban. And Brazil serves legal summons to former President Jair Bolsonaro in his hospital bed. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1955, The Bandung Conference came to an end in Indonesia. It was a meeting of 29 countries of the Global South, most of them newly independent. The conference condemned the growing camp politics of the Cold War. It led to the foundation of the non-aligned movement. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Kayıtsız şartsız kurtuluş yok tek başına. Sevgili Ankaralılar, bugün Türkiye'nin gözü kulağı birinci meclis.
A situação que eu tomar ciência dos termos da acusação e a intimação de apresentar a defesa.
Mas é uma medida de força. Qual hora para vencer? Que horas?
12h47.
O nome da senhora, por favor?
Cristiane.
Cristiane, desculpa, mais uma vez, tá?